Yeah, but here we go. So what do you think is going to hit the U.S. And the EU come this fall? They're talking about up to 40% cut in crop yields in the EU because of the
You
fertilizer
mean
costs.
in the agriculture?
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
that's starvation possible.
Well, my if I understand correctly, that the Strait of Hormuz traffic included a huge percentage of fertilizer
Hmm.
destined for Europe, among other places. And if at the same time, I mean, if you take from the farmer the seeds, if you take from the farmer the the fertilizer, and you take from the farmer the oil needed to run the tractor, you're not. I mean, they don't work with much of a margin anyway. You've just killed killed their margin, and they can't function. Um, that could happen here in the United States. The farmers here are very loud in their screaming about all of this. Look, the conditions are there for a spectacular implosion not, of the whole world economy, in which the success of a country will depend on how well or not it has prepared for that eventuality. And to give you an example, as best I can tell, the United States and China were the countries that had by far the largest reserves of oil buried in the ground. My understanding is Russia doesn't need them because it has enough oil and gas anyway. So it
Yeah.
doesn't, it
There
has,
was a proposal to do the same thing where they said, why? We just pump it when we need it. It's
yeah,
not, we don't need a reserve. It's in the ground
yeah,
already.
yeah. And you can see that China, which is dependent on the stuff imported, doesn't have that luxury, or at least
Right.
not yet. And the United States has the luxury, but would be badly hurt if they could not import. And there it has a little bit more to do with the kinds of oil. People talk about oil as if it were all one thing. It
Hmm.
isn't. It has at least two different kinds, and the whole refineries deal with one or the other. They don't deal with both of them. So anyway, the if here the clue is elsewhere. Now I'm going to be an economist for you. Mr. Besant has done remarkably odd
Oh,
things
yes, he has.
in the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks. He's giving away money, lots of it. He gave it away to the Saudis, he gave it away to the United Arab Emirates, and now he's giving it away to Japan. And the reason for that has particularly to do with the loss of oil revenue in the case of the Gulf countries and the price of oil in the case of Japan. Because what is happening is that the loss of oil revenue is driving the Gulf states to sell their holdings of U.S. treasuries.
Yep.
And the rising price of oil, which Japan has to import, is forcing them to sell their holdings of U.S. treasuries. So these two different opposite effect causes are having the same effect. Japan is the largest global owner of U.S. treasuries by far. And so the risk that they begin to sell, which they have done, um, is not only that they could go on for a long time selling this stuff, but it makes it dangerous for others to not do it. And if you unload Treasury, in order to sell them, you got to lower the price. And if you lower the price, if you know how a bond works, the interest rate goes up because the
Hmm.
amount that the borrower pays is fixed. If the price of the object that gets you that fixed payment goes down, the effective interest rate, which means interest rates everywhere else will go up because money will leave otherwise to come to get to buy this shit sold by the Gulf states and by Japan. So to stop that, Besson goes in and intervenes in the market, for example, giving the countries in the Gulf a temporary loan, well, then they don't have to cash in. And he says, don't cash them in. Use your holdings as security for the loan we'll give you. That way, the interest rates don't change, and he can do this sort of thing. And then he does a parallel thing with Japan. All right, but these are signs of extremity.
Yeah.
These are signs of, oh, if they don't do it, or if it stops, or if some American political apparatus decides they don't want to see this kind of thing, because it's going to become politically dangerous. You're cutting back financial help to American farmers, to American students, to American elderly. And what are you doing? Lending money to the billionaires who run the United Arab Emirates? That's not going to fly in the United States. That
Right.
you're going to get politicians who have a field day with this, you know. And Mr. Besant is not going to be able to explain that away because he can't do what I just did. Because to make it as honest as that leaves it open to, okay, yeah, but you're still helping all these foreigners. No, no, I'm doing it for us. Yeah, but you're lending to all these foreigners. Anyway, it's politically dangerous. That's why Trump doesn't say a word about it. That's why it is done with minimum notice by Mr. Besson. He's chosen because nobody listens or cares what he says anyway. So you can have it, you can say it because you can't allow it to be a secret because then
Right.
whoever leaks the secret gets the benefit of having leaked a secret. So the poor schmucks are all jammed up. And this problem is not going to go away. And the more you let that Strait of Hormuz be closed, of course, the more you're going to have these problems in the Gulf states and you're going to have this problem in Japan. Your solution isn't a solution unless you were lucky enough that the strait opened. So the strait didn't open. And now the question is how long can Mr. Trump wait? That's a real issue.
Hmm.
It used to be that the number one issue was how much military punishment can the Iranians accommodate?
A lot.
That question has been answered.
Yeah.
Apparently, all they need. So so what's left? Well, how much pain can Mr. Trump risk by having to take more and more extraordinary steps? Now, it's true if he could fob off on Erdogan something odd in the Bosphorus or the narrow channel there, yeah. But, it's not so clear how the Russians would react to such a thing. Do you really want to make? But there have been a chorus of people who have said that the war with Iran is mostly risky because it could spread, because it could draw in others. And obviously, it's already drawn in Lebanon in ways that hadn't been foreseen. It already involves the Gulf states, every one of them.
Yep.
Um, and who knows? I mean, I don't know what's coming next. But if interest rates go up because Besant can't pursue this, well, then you have the perfect storm. Then you have all the conditions for a recession. And how you would have a recession overlaid with what else is going on in the world, who knows? The worst depressions are when a typical business cycle, which we're due
Hmm.
for, overlaps with longer range problems.
Right.
And then what could be a downturn becomes a recession. And what could be a recession becomes a depression. And then all bets are off. The employment numbers released yesterday, because I keep track of that, are very bad. Last month was not a gain in employment, as all the predictions had said it would be. It was a decrease, 23,000 jobs. But what people didn't pay attention to, they also corrected the month of June and May downward. So they had overestimated. So they had to correct. If you add it all up, you're talking about, a declining job situation.
Right.
And
I don't remember a single correction that actually went up on
oh,
these numbers. They always go back down. They always go down. Uh,
not once in a while. Anyway, but you're right. Mostly they because people want to please the upper. They want the numbers to come in good and all the rest. It's not even clear why, they were allowed to go down this time.
yeah, it's a scary. It's well, scary to some people. It's gonna be very interesting autumn uh, of discontent.
But
So
I don't know where it where it's going to go. And there's also a deeper underlying issue. If you ask the question not is employment up or down, or is the inflation 4%, or is it really 5 or 6%? And there are lots of debates on all of that. I think you're wise. It's wiser to ask the more basic question: what is the relationship between the top 10% of your population and everybody else? And we now have the numbers where we can do that. And what the numbers say isn't the important thing, I can tell you that, but what's important is that those numbers are now showing up in popular discussion in a way they didn't used to. And in other words, the distribution of wealth and the distribution of income, which are much more profound shapers of a political story over time, are now in the consciousness. I was struck starting about a month ago when the papers here blared the wonderful good news that AI and everything having to do with AI was on its way to deliver to us the world's first trillionaire, Elon Musk.
but he lost that status. He's
He
now just like
lost
on a
it,
700
and
billion.
now he may be able to regain it. You know, he and there was, I would say, 2/3 celebrate. Isn't that wonderful? Oh, Mr. Musk, what a genius, and blah, all that, which is the norm. We've had that for 20 years. But I would say a third of the commentary was able to say, wait a minute, here in the United States, to say that the system just delivered 300 or 400 billion dollars worth of increased wealth to the person who was already the richest person isn't an achievement.
Yep.
Now, they weren't even as direct as I just was, but they were getting there. And suddenly, when the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, which is the best producer of data in this country, economic data, when they put out, as they did last week, their graph of the labor share of income in the United States. From the time that statistic was first created, 1947, 2 years after the end of World War II, to the present, the line looks like this. I'm going to do it with my finger. You see my finger? It bounces
Yeah.
a little, but the trend line is basically
Yeah.
crystal clear. And the last 10 years, therefore, Mr. Trump, the steepest period of decline. And before, declines were interrupted with an upturn and another decline. But no, starting 10 years ago, whoa, it goes down sharper and without interruption. All right. That's the end of MAGA.
Yeah.
MAGA blows up when that statistic plays out in the culture.
Yeah.
And that is beginning, I don't want to overstate it, it's beginning to happen.
Yeah.
Uh,
I don't think somebody it should be. Well, I'm not a socialist. I believe in mixed economies because that's the only reality that works. Neither edge works too well, but an economy should serve the majority of the people, the
yeah.
vast majority of the people. Otherwise, why have an economy? It's not an economy then. It's a fiefdom. If
Yeah.
only the top 1 or 2% are served by it and everybody else serves them, that's a fiefdom. That's not an economy.
But stars, that's what we got here. I'm speaking to you from the
Yeah,
top 10% in this country are in charge of everything.
yeah,
And I literally mean everything. These are the people who own and operate the businesses. These are the people who own and operate all the mass communication media. These are the people who sit at the top of the political pyramid. Uh, and 10% may be more than I ought to say. I maybe ought to say 5% or
oh yeah,
3%. And that's an argument. But that the vast majority of the people are spectators not allowed in,
oh yeah,
that's, that is true and has been true for most of my life in this country. All that I could tell you is worse and worse and worse. And it's worse through Republicans and it's worse through. That's why
yeah,
the alienation is from both. It's not just, oh, the Republicans are the business party and the Democrats are the labor. That's what came out of the 1930s. That's gone. The
yep,
two parties have eviscerated that way of thinking. Now it's Tweedledum, Tweedledee, everybody dancing to the tune. It was the inauguration of Trump last time when I don't know if you saw it, but up on the podium as he takes the oath of office, sitting behind him in a kind of semicircle, were all the billionaires, Elon Musk and Bezos and Zuckerberg. Those people, each with their significant other, sitting there, dressed up in her nicest dress. That's, I mean, Jesus Christ, it was glaring. It was grotesque for anybody who understands what was being told there.
oh yeah, yeah. it's yeah, you are absolutely right. And you know, Russia to a smaller degree is also following that same system because
Yeah,
that's the
my
modern
guess is
system.
looks
It,
like it.
I mean the disparity is much smaller, but it's there. Um, you know, it's the bottom 50% own 16% of the entire country. I think it was this where the US is 3%. But
Yes,
it's still a disparity. I mean,
yes.
okay, I'm not against the rich, obviously. Rich, you need the rich people too. But when you know, I think I was reading the average CEO back in the 40s had about 40 times the salary of the lowest salaried
That's
employee they had. So, you know, basically a janitor, and now it's 400.
that's
I
right.
mean, that's when you get that ludicrous level. That I,
Well, I was on a TV show the other day, and they asked me for an example. So, it's a mistake. I know these things. So I said, all right, I'll pick you one. Brian Nickel. Brian Nickel is the CEO of Starbucks Corporation.
hmm
So let me tell you about him. He started in his job as CEO in the second half of 2024, and he was paid a bonus for taking the job, and he was paid nicely both in 2024 and in 2025. I don't have data for this year. But let me just tell you about what he took home in 2024 and 2025. The total amount $120 million.
not bad. Yeah.
$120
Uh,
million, way more, for example, than the CEO of McDonald's hamburger or Wendy's or other fast foods. And I said, now let me explain to you how that's possible. The salary, the payment to a CEO is determined by the board of directors.
mhm.
And the board of directors has, in the case of Starbucks, 11 members on it. And then in the TV show, I mentioned some of them because they're the CEOs of other companies.
Right.
I said, but I want you to know that on the board, one of the 11 members that decided Brian Nichols' salary is a man named Brian Nichols.
Yeah.
And the conservative person who was interviewing me, a guy who says every third line, I love capitalism, I love it, all of that. Even he laughed. Even he. And I said to him, you're laughing. He said, yeah, I'm laughing. I said, I don't mean to call you out, but you're laughing because it is, in a way, funny. It's funny that a group of 11 people, one of whom is X, decided to pay X $120 million in under 2 years. I mean, holy mackerel. Do you understand you're paying the man wild amounts of money?
But then he'll vote for the next guy on his board of
Yeah,
directors
yeah.
also.
And he probably sits on other boards where he's
Yep.
doing something because he feels funny offering another CEO of another big corporation way less than he is getting from his. It's just,
Yeah. I like the term the self-licking ice cream cone.
yeah,
That's,
yeah, exactly. But also, and because I did this on the show, at which point my questioner became visibly uncomfortable, so I stopped. But I said, I want you to understand that everybody watching this program, a television program, every time you go into a Starbucks and you order a latte or whatever it is you get there, I want you to understand that part of the price you pay is what enables Starbucks to give this man $120 million in under 2 years. And I'm not going to talk to you, I said, about the magnificent automobile and chauffeur they give him, which is not included, and the
Right, of course.
beautiful office they give him, which is not included, and on and
And
he
the
said,
corporate
"Stop."
jet and the
He said, "Stop." And I said, "Yes, stop. I'll stop."
uh yeah, yeah. But and you know, say what you want about the robber barons, as they used to call them. They gave things back to the community, and they did it in Russia, they did it in Europe, they did it in the U.S. But they were industrialists, and now you've got mostly finance, and they don't give anything back to anybody. They,
And it's only up to their decency or lack thereof. We have billionaires. I mean, for example, take Warren Buffett. His plan is to give everything away by the time he dies. And he's one of the, one of the 10 richest guys in the country. And he gives money. And Bezos, he doesn't. But Bezos's ex-wife, who got
yeah, I heard
divorced,
about that.
she got, I think, $39 billion as part of the settlement. She gives away huge amounts of money to a women's organization, feminist organizations. Okay, I mean, at least a little of that. But many of them don't give a nickel
Oh
and
yeah,
are proud of it. Proud of it.
yeah. I never quite understood that, but
No.
I was raised a bit differently, I guess.
Yeah,
Uh,
yes. Slightly.
you give back because you know the community that helped you or that you're a part of, you give back to it. I mean, that's still, yeah, it's even with with the library, Lenin's library in Moscow. That wasn't built by the Bolshevik. That was built by a merchant. I don't remember the original name, the guy's name, but what he said was, you know, one day I'm going to stand before God, and I've done not the best things sometimes, and I need to do something to make up for it. So this is one of the things. Here, have a library to the city. And it's a
So I
huge
mean that
library.
was that was constructed after Lenin was already dead.
No, no, that was constructed about 20 years before the Bolsheviks came to power.
Oh,
Yeah, so that was a gift to the city because that was expected. I mean, it's like, yeah, you rose up in the city or this town, you give back to it. It was like Carnegie when he wanted to put a library in every
right.
town
Oh,
and village.
listen, I grew up my family moved around in Ohio and Missouri, and I remember getting books with my mother at the little Carnegie Library in the middle of town. Was the nicest building, and many of these towns
Yeah,
had been built, properly and good materials, lasted a long time, and was a real community service.
yeah,
They wouldn't have funded a library any other way. No, no, no,
yeah. You don't see that anymore. You don't see that ethos in
no.
and you know, when I did my MBA at NC State, so I was out of the military. I was taught as an officer, your men are your responsibility.
Right.
24/7, your men are your responsibility. Your people are your responsibility. And you get to the MBA schools, and what are they teaching? Your people are a resource. Well, no, but the printer's a resource. You squeeze the life out of the printer, toss it in the trash, buy the next. No, no, no. Your people are the same resource. You squeeze the life out of them, then toss them aside. Like, yeah, that's just so wrong. But that's, you know,
That's
40
a
years
that's a
ago, that's what they were
wonder.
teaching.
I'm going to steal that from you. That is a wonderful juxtaposition. That's a wonderful juxtaposition.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was in shock actually when you know the professors there telling you that, oh yeah, your people are your resource. Just use them as you need to. I'm like, that's not right. But you know that, and you get
I
these.
had I had a very you and I are more similar than I would have imagined. I had the same reaction in college when the economics professor, my first one, taught us here's the way to understand production. The capitalist, the employer, gathers together the appropriate inputs and puts them together in such a way as to maximize the outputs for the given inputs. And you arrange the people, with the machines, with the raw materials to get the most outputs out of them. And I all I did as a kid was to raise my hand and say, well, I can understand with the machine and with the pile of raw materials, but a human being, you know, if you move it this way, it's going to destroy his left arm. If you move it
Right.
that way, he's going to cough a lot. If you do, how do you take that into account? And the answer of the professor was crystal clear. He looked at me and he said with his mouth, "You don't." And with his eyes, he let me know that was one stupid question. I hope you don't give me another. And believe me, I didn't.
You know, I was always taught as management, if your company unionizes, that's a failure of management to take care of its employees.
Right.
Because they're your responsibility. And you know, my father, he worked for a locally owned engineering company. And they had parties for the families. They gave everybody a big turkey. They gave the kids. I mean, this was 1980s. They gave the kids on Christmas $20 bill to every kid as a gift. Which for a kid in 1980s, $20 is like
Yeah.
almost $1 million. Wow, I can buy anything with that $20. And they took care of the people. And then the company got sold. The guy got old. His kids didn't want to continue. It got sold to a Canadian company and we're
All of
off to
that
the corporate
disappeared.
races. It all
Yep.
disappeared. People were now, I mean, people were basically meat. I mean, my father was the chief engineer, worked 22 years in that company, could have left many times too. I mean, he trained a lot of guys that then went off, did their own thing, that made their own companies, could have gone off to any of them. Stuck around. And then in 2008, when you had problems, you know, he was retirement age, but he wanted to still keep working. And I told him, you know, Michael, you're the oldest person here. We got a cut. So we'll give you, they did give him a severance package. And he's like, you know, I could have fought it, but I would have lost. But the point is, not whether they gave him a severance package, but just the way they released him. They could have done it, you know, civilized. Oh, you know, after 22 years, Michael's retiring. We'll have a lunch for him or something. No, they said, go pack your table. That's it. Go pack your box.
Did they have two people escort him out of the building?
Oh, he never said that, but he came back very upset. He was in a depression for a while.
Yeah,
It's
of
like, and I've
course.
seen that happen so many times. And I
Me
worked
too.
after the
Oh, I've
military in
seen.
IT. It was horrible the way they treat people. And then, you know, yeah, it was just people
Well,
as an input.
all of that, I'm telling you, here in the United States anyway, all of that is that wonderful phrase, chickens coming home to roost.
Yep.
All of that is stuff that was done to countless people like your father, Michael, or millions that you and I will never know. But all of that is coming to a head in this country now, particularly in the mental processes of young people. We don't have permanent job. My students can't get a job like I had. I've been a professor. had to teach two courses a semester, two semesters a year. They're all what we call adjuncts. And what that means is they get paid shit. And they have to teach two courses at the community college over here and a course every other week at the state school over there. Everybody's doing gigs, everybody's doing, and they can't put a life together, and they're running from one corner to another. Do they have time to keep up with their field and read and think? No, they're
Yep.
running around. You know, if they're married, they're trying to coordinate all this with their wife. If they have children, which more and more of them do, but forget that. But if they have children, then that's it. Every nickel they have is holding together this little unit. You know, they got to pay crazy money for daycare so they can both work, and that, it's just, and you're a little hamster, you're running on that
Yep.
wheel
Yep.
and you can never get off, you know.
Yep. I fully agree. And it's the same. It's just the same financialized economy that's been sold to everybody because I'm seeing it. Russia's heading the same way. It's heading slower, and there's some efforts to stop it, but it's heading inadvertently. It's what the U.S. was in the 90s, and there's still time to turn it around. But the point is who does the economy serve? And
Well, let me tell you something that an irony of history, and then I do have to go
yeah,
here. If Russia can turn it around, if you can do that, that that would be the single most important imaginable step you could take to make Russia be a positive idea in the minds of Americans compared to what it is now. Now Russia is evil and dangerous, and it's all that old 75 years of propaganda without limit. But if people could say, here's an example, right? Look what they did this to stop what you just said from continuing, and it worked, and whoa, what a support you would, and Americans would be interested to learn that, and they would be so interested in seeing if that were really true that the whole negative about Russia would be pushed, not by everybody, but by many people, would be pushed aside.
they've done a lot of things, but one of the problems Russia has, just like a lot of countries, is the affordability of housing. You want to have people have kids, but man, if they can't, if they're stuck in small apartments, they're not going to have kids,
That's right. It's
and they can't
impossible.
afford a larger apartment. And this is something I've been pushing. I'm in the LDPR party. It's something I've been pushing some of the members of parliament that I know. I'm hoping in the next 2 years I'll go run for parliament too. But look, you create a fund of apartments, two-room apartments. Uh, Family has their first child, you give them an apartment to own. If they have a two-room apartment, well, they already have one then. They have
Mm,
their third child, you give them a three-room apartment to own, you take back the two-room apartment. But they
mm,
own that. If they don't want, if that's all the kids they have, that's it. They have that apartment to own. One, they don't have to pay. They don't have to pay a loan off. So they've got extra money spent in the economy. Two, you're ordering apartments that are being built, so you're stimulating the economy to build it, and you're stimulating population growth because you're giving people room to. They have 4 or 5 kids, you give them a four-room apartment. But again, it all pays for itself in the end.
Yeah, and let me give you the flip side here in New York City. The rents are unbelievable. And what you're doing is you're driving people to be very angry. This is very
Yeah,
dangerous. Whatever people say, having a decent place to live is one of the basic
yeah,
determinants of the quality of your life. And if you
absolutely.
can't afford more and more, and you have to live more and more people in less and less room, you're just building an explosion.
Yep.
I keep telling that to the people here because I'm a product of the elite schools in the country, and so I know all these people. But they can't hear it. I mean, they
Yeah,
just can't.
yeah. That's very
All
true.
right,
That's very
Stas,
true a
I,
lot.
I am I am overdue for something
Yeah,
already. So I got to
me
get
too.
off.
Thank you very much
Yeah. And by
for
the way,
joining.
please send me a link
Yes,
because we will post it and all of that.
yes, absolutely.
All
I'll
right,
have it up in about a day or so.
perfect. Take
Yep.
care, man. Good to talk to
Cheers.
you.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure.